Cronenberg, volevo chiederle, nei suoi film c'è sia un impatto molto forte dal punto di vista artistico, sia un momento popolare dal punto di vista che i suoi film sono molto visti. Volevo chiederle se la distinzione classica tra film popolare e film d'élite per lei ha un'importanza o invece pensa che sia la stessa cosa.
Yeah, the distinction between what is, as you say, elite and what is popular is also something that's very hard for me to address directly because I don't really think too much in those terms. You know, I mean, you're making a film for an audience, you are communicating with an audience, and you use everything you have to make that connection. And so you use whatever there is, you know. I mean, some movies are very much embedded in the pop culture of a very specific moment, and they age very rapidly, you know. They become obsolete very quickly, but they can still have a very big impact at the moment. There are other films that have a more universal appeal, and maybe don't have such an immediate impact. When you talk about my films being very successful, I'm afraid it's not true. Sadly, my most successful film still is The Fly, which was made over 20 years ago. That's the truth, in terms of box office, sheer box office. So, although the films do gradually seem to have an impact, and I certainly have a lot of fans and enthusiasts and so on, compared with movies that make $100 million, $200 million, like Lord of the Rings makes $1 billion at the box office, I've never made a movie that's come remotely close to any of that. So, and yet, you know, when you're dealing with film, began as a popular entertainment. You know, they used to. I mean, it used to be considered to be quite lower class, working class. It was for maids. You know, it was for maids and shop girls. It was not for serious people. And in fact, it was really. I don't. In France, it was one of the first places that really took film seriously as an art form. In America, it was very disposable. It's one of the reasons that there are many wonderful American films that don't exist physically anymore, because the minute that they were shown and made some money, then they were just destroyed, physically destroyed. You know, there was no attempt to keep them as archival or anything. So it took, first of all, the French were beginning to take Hollywood seriously, because Hollywood was not taken seriously by Americans, you know, as an art form, I mean. So it's always, there are very few forms of art that were not, did not have a popular base to them. I mean, of course, I remember Oliver Stone once said to me, you know, are you happy to remain so marginal? And I said, well, how big an audience do you need? I mean, you need an audience, but really it's a very simple thing. I mean, if you make a very expensive film that costs $100 million, you are basically agreeing to make it for a big audience. I mean, it's a sort of a thing of honor, you know, that you accept that you have the responsibility of other people's money, a lot of money. You really have to know what game you're playing. But there's great energy. I mean, as the wonderful Russian-American writer Vladimir Nabokov said, there is nothing so exhilarating as Philistine vulgarity, he said, which was his very intellectual way of saying that there's great energy in popular culture, which an artist it's dangerous for an artist to completely ignore that and become very, very abstract and very extreme. And, you know, I mean, even Nabokov with Lolita had a huge worldwide hit, you know. But I must say, as a filmmaker, I don't really think in categories like that. You know, I don't think about it that way. I have to. There are no rules. I'm totally guided by my own intuition, and it's the only guide I have.
Volevo fare io una domanda, perché in una conversazione recente con me e Domenico Cronenberg ci ha detto qualcosa di importante. Lui è un regista molto legato alla letteratura, ha fatto per lo schermo la riduzione di autori importanti come Burroughs, come Ballard, come McGrath, come anche Stephen King. E proprio l'altro giorno, mentre presentava i suoi quadri, ha detto di essere più legato alla letteratura che alla pittura. E ci ha detto anche che ha terminato un romanzo che sta per essere pubblicato e che, se non ho capito male, uscirà in Italia per molti anni. Io penso che tutti i giornalisti qui presenti siano molto curiosi di sapere di cosa si tratta, se possiamo parlarne.
No. No, truly. I've only written 60 pages of it, and it's been an interesting experience. I mean, it's. I thought originally, I thought my father was a writer, and I thought that I would be a novelist, and so I'm very surprised to find myself sitting here as a filmmaker and not a novelist. And when a woman who was a senior editor at Penguin Canada said to me, "Have you ever thought of writing a novel?" I said, "Yes, for about 50 years." So I'm beginning to write this novel. We've, based on the pages that I've written, we found publishers all over the world, which is very terrifying to me. You know, there will be a Czech version and a Dutch version and a Portuguese version and a Spanish version, Italian and French, and I haven't written it yet. So this is very terrifying, but I can't really. It's at a very delicate phase right now, so I can't really talk about it. It's not a horror. If someone said, "Well, is it like Stephen King?" and I say, "No, it's not like Stephen King. I don't know what it's like, but it's not like Stephen King. We wouldn't call it a horror or science fiction novel at all. But what it is exactly, well, I don't know yet."
Ci può dire solo quali sono i suoi scrittori preferiti?
Well, there are many. You know, I don't have. I mean, I've been reading a lot of Russian writers. I've been reading Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Believe it or not, I'd never read War and Peace until just recently. But I've read a lot of Dostoevsky and Gogol, and of course, in the old days, it was Burroughs and William Burroughs, and Nabokov actually was very much a favorite writer of mine. So. But there are many really interesting writers around. I've been reading Philip Roth a lot over the years. I'm sure there's some that I've forgotten. But I'm very eclectic, you know. I love the form of the novel. It's very interesting to me. Actually, at one point, someone approached me about doing a movie of Voyeur, the Roma novel, which I was very interested in doing, except that they didn't want really to do the novel. They just wanted to do something else.
It's a very difficult novel to put on the screen.
Yeah, although in its own way, it's extremely cinematic, though. I mean, by its essence and by design. So I would have been very interested to do that, but I think they really didn't want to really do that. They wanted to just use that to turn it into some murder mystery. Then that's not very interesting to me. So. That's basically.
Ok, altre domande? C'è una lì e un'altra sulla destra.